maybe about 2 years ago, or just creeping up to about 3 years ago now, I did one of the earlier videos on my channel. I did a top 25 films of all time 2-part video. My thoughts have changed a lot since then on certain films. I've seen a lot of newer stuff that I hadn't seen before. I thought I'd revisit this top films of all time list because I thought it'd be quite interesting. Big shout out to Nige over at Rockgod 2004 for inspiring me to revisit mine, because he just dropped his top 20 films of all time very recently. I'll drop a link to his video down below. But yeah, he had some great choices in his, and obviously films I've never heard of as well. So he's given me films to check out at the same time. So I'm hoping I can do the same here with my top list. So let's get on with the video. Number 20, Akira, or Akira, if you want to be more Western about it. Discovering Japanese animation back in the day when I was about 12, 13 years old. This was the big one. And it always has been the big one for me. I think I've always, when I speak about anime, I talk about 80s and 90s anime being a big influence on me. Akira is still king for me in terms of the movie space anyway. The animation is so detailed and so smooth and slick. The soundtrack of this movie is one of my favourite movie soundtracks of all time. Yeah, the characters are great. The story is very, very nuanced and, you know, dense, and there's a lot to kind of like unpack with the story here. Basically a story of like government powers trying to control power that is uncontrollable. Akira is fucking awesome and I adore this movie. Number 19 is my favourite zombie film of all time, and that is Return of the Living Dead. I saw this about 2 or 3 years ago. I adore this film. Horror comedy, yes, but it's just delightful in its basically approach to it. I love all the characters. I love the mythos of the zombie, where they're pretty much invincible in this film. And I do believe this is the first zombie film to introduce the whole we need brains kind of thing. Brains! The soundtrack's great. The practical effects are amazing. Whoever they got to do the Tar Man zombie, the way he shuffles and walks is the creepiest fucking thing ever. It's like his ligaments and his muscles don't work, and he's just using momentum to sway himself to walk. It's just such good, like, practical physical acting that I adore. This film is brilliant. I can rewatch it over and over again and never get bored of it. It is my favourite zombie film of all time. That's Return of the Living Dead. Number 18 is a sequel to a massive horror franchise that people either love or hate. But I'm a bit like, the first two are great, but I've chosen its sequel, and that is Saw 2. Yes, I love this film, guys. I'm not going to hide it from you. I actually really love this film. I love the whole kind of like expansion on the original movie, where it's just two guys in the bathroom. In this, it's like a bunch of people in a house trying to survive. But you've also got the police subplot with Detective Matthews trying to find his son, and the whole unraveling there. This film is infinitely rewatchable to me. It introduced even more crazy ideas to the franchise. Essentially, Saw 2 is basically the catalyst of what the Saw franchise became. You got these crazy cool traps. You got all these characters. You got a mental bloody twist at the end, and it is all capped off by the amazing acting by Tobin Bell. Oh yes, there will be blood. Number 17, I have loads of memories for this movie. I think this film is superior to the first one. Yes, I've chosen another sequel for my list. Joe Dante's insane, bombastic sequel classic. I'm saying classic like it is. I don't think people think it is, but I do. I adore this film, Gremlins 2. Fucking hell, what a way to expand on the original and just go batshit insane. Apparently the rumours are, I think it's basically confirmed at this point, that Warner Brothers went to Joe Dante and was like, we want you to make another Gremlins film. And he was like, I'll do it, but I want to have complete control over the production. And they were like, okay, here's $50 million. Go crazy. And go crazy does he in this movie. Holy shit, this film is just a bombastic, wonderful comedy. Lots of horror in there as well. It basically parodies itself over and over again. It brings into question the rules as well. It makes fun of the Mogwai rules, which is really funny to see. I've got a cool memory as well of this movie. I remember my granddad buying this for me on VHS way back when I was way too young to watch it, but I think I had already seen the first movie. And just fucking great memories for this film. I just remember creeping down really early in the morning to watch it before school. Yeah, I love this film. I think it's superior to the original in every facet, in my opinion, in every way. And you know, if you're a metalhead, you can't go wrong with a bit of Slayer ripping your ears off during the spider gremlin transformation scene. I love this film, guys. Number 16 is heralded as a 90s classic for years. But yeah, that film is Seven. Wow. This is, in my opinion, the greatest police procedural thriller ever made. I think Brad Pitt is on form. It happens to be, in my opinion, his best movie. I think it's my favourite Brad Pitt character. I think it's my favourite performance by Brad Pitt. Morgan Freeman is great as he always is, and I think he's fantastic in this movie. This film goes into the darkest recesses of humanity to me. When our characters discover each of these deadly sin murders, and they just get more horrific as time goes on. The lust kill in particular, you don't see anything. A lot of this stuff is implied, of course, but when they talk about the lust kill and all it is a photograph and a witness's testimony, it is just fucking terrifying. It gets you down to your bones. It's fucking horrible. This is where Seven becomes an absolute masterpiece, a police procedural thriller masterpiece. I'm going to say this now because I've said it since I saw it. I believe this film has the greatest ending for any movie I've ever seen. It doesn't pull no punches. It doesn't water it down. There's no happy ending here. This film sticks with its dark tone from, you know, second one to the final minutes of this film. It is one of the darkest movies you'll ever see in terms of its subject matter, and the ending doesn't alleviate that. It makes it fucking worse. Seven is a fucking masterpiece. Number 15 on my list is Joe Dante's The Burbs. I saw this like a year ago for the first time, and I was just grinning from ear to ear watching this film. This film is basically about a little cul-de-sac on a weekend, just being nosy little bastards, basically. There's this new family that have moved in. They're a bit weird. No one's seen what they look like, and they just want to be really nosy and see what they're up to. Tom Hanks in this is fantastic as well. I love this movie, guys. The sardine eating scene is comedy gold. The use of sound design in this film is fucking brilliant. I adore it. This film, for me, is a perfect Sunday afternoon movie. It makes me wish I lived in a cul-de-sac in America and had a weekend off, and just in the summer. It's a summer weekend movie, guys. I love it. I just love it. It's so good. All the performances are great. The neighbourhood kind of camaraderie and chemistry between the actors, you just believe that they're just neighbours, and they all have their own personalities. You can tell they don't necessarily like each other perfectly, but they get along to try and figure out what these new neighbours are up to. So much fun, guys. One of the rare comedies that I absolutely love, and I'm not a big comedy guy, but this film is fucking brilliant. Number 14 is a Japanese classic, samurai classic from the legend Akira Kurosawa, and it is 1961's Yojimbo. I saw this about 5 years ago, and it blew me away, guys. It really did. I fucking adored this film when I first saw it, and it just keeps getting better on rewatches. This film inspired films like Fist for the Dollars with Clint Eastwood. This film is basically the original movie. Like, Fist for the Dollars is a remake to this film. But Yojimbo is about this masterless samurai who goes into this village, and he basically is tasked to stop evildoers. But there's two kind of families warring over each other, and he has to decide which family to align with. But he keeps jumping between the families to make money, and it is kind of, that's where the kind of comedy is in there a little bit of duplicity. But yeah, this film's great. It's so good. The acting is great. The cinematography is masterfully done, and Toshiro Mifune is hands down one of the greatest actors of all time. He doesn't even have to talk. He can just, like, you know what the character is thinking just by facial expressions. He has a lot of, like, very kind of, the way he emotes is so good in this film. And yeah, Yojimbo is fucking brilliant. If you've not seen Yojimbo, guys, I recommend it. If you're into just samurai films, this is a samurai western from the 60s that I just cannot implore you to see more. Number 13 is a 1975 classic. It ushered in the blockbuster, Steven Spielberg's absolute classic, Jaws. I rewatched this last year for the first time on 4K, and this film just keeps holding up time and time again. This film is timeless to me, absolutely timeless. I love the cinematography, I love all the characters, I love the tale it tells here. It's just such a simple story about this shark attack and about this, you know, guy that just wants to stop other people from dying, trying to shut down the beach, but the authorities are like, nah, we're keeping this beach open. It's our biggest money maker. Money over lives, guys. It speaks truth in a lot of things. This film is a masterpiece as well. I think all these films on this list are masterpieces in my opinion, but Jaws is one of those massive movies that basically can be untouched for me. Timeless, classic, with one of the most impeccable soundtracks of all time. I can't ever imagine this film ever being topped when it concerns a shark movie. This is the greatest shark attack movie of all time, and it will always be that. And there wouldn't be any other shark attack movies without it. My number 12 is probably the greatest action film ever made, in my opinion, and that is Die Hard. I remember watching this on Christmas Eve when I was 9 years old with my dad and my granddad, and I've ever since just adored this film. It's infinitely rewatchable as well. Is it a Christmas movie? That debate has been going on for years and years. I feel like the answer is based on person to person. Like, I feel like it depends on your perspective. I watched this for the first time on Christmas Eve, and for as far as I'm aware, growing up, it was always on TV at Christmas time. So I've always perceived it as a kind of Christmas staple for me. So it's always been a Christmas movie for me. Die Hard, one of the great action films of all time, ushered in one man versus all kind of trope. No one's done it better than Bruce Willis, John McClane versus the terrorist at the Nakatomi Plaza, and of course the amazing performance by Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber. This film is a just absolute staple, rewatchable until my last breath, I guess. Number 11 is a film that I discovered super late in my life. I must have been a teen, you know, in my mid-teens at the time. This is one of my dad's favourite films as well, so it speaks a lot to me. James Cameron's masterpiece, that's right, I said it guys, The Terminator. If I would choose this over the sequel, it will always be this one. I just love Arnold Schwarzenegger as an evil just machine out to kill. It's given us some of the greatest characters of all time. The T-800 is the most recognisable, you know, movie kind of character, villain, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, and Sarah Connor has become one of the most, you know, talked about female heroines in movie history. The Terminator is absolutely essential for any sci-fi fan, action fan. It's almost like a slasher film in disguise, guys, in my opinion. It has that kind of vibe to it as well. I love the art design, the production design of the future war. It has one of my favourite soundtracks ever. It's just fantastic. That's The Terminator. We are down to our top 10, guys. Top 10. This has been difficult. I'm knackered. Whew. Number 10, what could it be? I was insanely obsessed with this film when it came out in 1993 as a kid. Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. I can't put into words how much this film is just magical to me. Even from a child's perspective, growing up into adulthood, it still holds its magic. The T-Rex breakout sequence is one of the greatest scenes ever put to film, in my opinion. It's a masterclass of filmmaking. It's just, when you get to that sequence and you look at what they were able to pull off, it is just magical. The T-Rex breaking that, and you've got the animatronic T-Rex going down, looking at the torchlight, and its eye dilates. It's fucking terrifying stuff, man. Absolutely terrifying. But you're in awe of it because it's a fucking T-Rex on your big screen for the first time ever. You never see a T-Rex that looks so good. Yeah, Jurassic Park. Everything about it. The characters. The dinosaur effects. Some of it is a bit hokey now, but the animatronic stuff is fucking still you know, stands the test of time, guys. It really does. The soundtrack is where my heart lies for this movie. The soundtrack is incredible. John Williams at it again, mate. Just so fucking good. Like, this movie is so good. I adore it. Is it a perfect film? Some would say no, it has its mistakes. You know, they've been documented over the years. But for its magic, bringing realistic looking dinosaurs to your screen for the very first time in 1993, and it still holds up, I had to have it in my top 10. It had to be in there. It means so much to me growing up, and it's a film I put on now. I'm just like, this film is still fucking magical. If a film could hold its magic for that long, you're onto something very, very special, guys. My number 9 is a recent film. I will defend this movie until my last breath. I keep saying this, guys. It's a theme. And it had to be in my top 10. I adore this movie. James Wan's Malignant. I have never been so hyped for a horror film than I have been after seeing Malignant. I remember the credits rolling and I just audibly shouted, "That was awesome," because it's fucking awesome, guys. I absolutely adore this bloody movie. It pays homage to a lot of kind of like eras of horror. You've got a bit of everything in there, but it specifically has homages to the 70s and Italian horror as well, like the giallos, like films like Deep Red and The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, you know, films like that. It really harkens back to those like really kind of giallo films. And the main thing I love about it is always batshit insane, which helps, I think. I think that what makes this movie fucking awesome to me. It's batshit insane. Some people would say the dialogue is terrible. I think the dialogue is a bit hokey on purpose, and I think the actors are delivering it in that way on purpose. They're having fun with this movie. And I think if you sit down and give this movie a second shot, if you didn't like it on the first watch, I'm hoping you would like it on the second watch, because this film is absolutely incredible. At the time of it coming out in 2021, I thought it was the best film, the best horror film in 5 years. And I still think it might still be the best horror film that's come out since. I can't think of a horror film I've liked more than Malignant in the last 8 years. It's incredible. It's so good. I'm probably the outlier here, because I know that it got very mixed reception, because I don't think people kind of understood it. I know that's kind of condescending. I don't mean to be that way. But if you understand James Wan and his history of horror and what he loves, you can understand that this is kind of just a love letter to horror. It's a love letter to horror, and more important, like I said, it's a love letter to Italian giallo horror. And I just think it succeeds in every way. It helps that it's violent as all fuck as well. This is a violent movie. It's savage. It's brutal. And the reveal is a big, like, what the fuck is going on kind of reveal. I adore this film, guys. I think it's absolutely just a perfect movie. It probably isn't. In my opinion, it is. I can rewatch it and have a fucking blast every fucking time. The police station sequence is absolutely one of my favourite action sequences ever. It is batshit insane. So good. Malignant. What a film, guys. I adore this movie. My number 8. This film was so important for me to actually fall in love with movies. It had to go in my top 10. And that is the original 1977 Star Wars. Now, you're probably saying to yourself, Jason, you picked Star Wars. The original, yes. Solely because I just think it encapsulates everything I love about cinema. Great characters, great soundtrack, production design, a magical adventure that you go on. This film, when I was a kid, this film just made me fall in love with movies completely. It changed my life in terms of movie going experiences, and obviously I didn't go and see it, but you know what I mean, like it kind of just changed the way I looked at films going forward. And it to me, I could rewatch this one over and over again and never get bored of it. The characters are amazing. It has one of the greatest villains of all time with Darth Vader. You guys know Star Wars, right? I keep going into it over and over again. People know Star Wars. Even if you haven't watched Star Wars, you probably know it through pop culture osmosis, right? Surely. But yeah, Star Wars, massive impact on my love for movies. It made me probably love movies even more when I was a kid. I was about 5 or 6 years old when I saw this film for the first time. Just magical to me. A magical science fiction, just adventure fantasy. It's just epic, isn't it? And the Death Star trench run is one of the most classic finales of any movie ever, in my opinion. The greatest sequel of all time. Aliens. Now, I've been a massive fan of the first two Alien movies for the longest time, but I've always gravitated more towards Alien for being like the one I prefer, because they're both completely different, right? One's straight up sci-fi horror, the other one's more sci-fi action. But as I've gotten older, guys, as I've rewatched this movie more and more, I gravitate to this one just so much more. The characters, the Marines are all likeable. Ellen Ripley is one of the greatest female characters of all time. And what James Cameron was able to do to expand the mythos and the lore of the Xenomorph from the first movie to this one is outstanding. The production design, the kind of creativity and what he wanted to do. This film is a prime example of a director with an absolute vision for what he wanted to have on screen. And this film, from minute one to the closing credits, is an absolute fucking blast. Masterpiece? I probably will say so. There's so many quotable moments in this film, so many memorable moments. I fucking love this film. Get away from her, you bitch. When she walks out in that power loader and says those words, I get fucking chills. Also, there's a scene where she meets the Queen Alien for the first time and she does this little head tilt. Most badass thing ever. Just a little head tilt. Ellen Ripley's the greatest fucking female character ever. Badass. Completely, in my opinion. I love this movie. It is fucking awesome. It's definitely on my top 10. It has to be. I've rewatched this numerous times and I'm going to rewatch it for years and years to come. And I'm probably going to find even more little details that I love about it, even going forward. It's a film that you are always discovering new little details. And the level of detail in this film is out fucking standing. Oh, and the soundtrack kicks ass as well. You know, it's just a full package. It's what you want when you want to go. It's a film it's the kind of experience you want when you go to the cinema. Is that full-on, just memorable moments, awesome scenarios, just a badass main character, an awesome villain, a bombastic soundtrack. It's just fucking everything in this movie is there. It's perfection. It's one of the best films ever. Go and watch it. Honestly, it is incredible. If you've not seen it, you're fucking missing out. Aliens is a fucking masterpiece. Hell fucking yes. Get away from her, you bitch. Number 6 is kind of like Malignant, a film I will defend until I fucking die. The 2013 Evil Dead reboot. I'm reluctant to call this a remake at this point because in the new movie, the director is kind of like, feels like there's a connection between the movies. Remake, reboot, whatever you want to call this movie, I just think it's a perfect horror film. An absolute perfect horror film. 10 out of 10 all day long for me. What a wonderful way to bring Evil Dead to the modern audience. Keeping it faithful to the original, giving us buckets of blood and brutal violence, and basically keeping it as true as possible to the original in terms of its story, but giving us a bunch of new characters and kind of trying to tell its own story by keeping it to the original. I adore this film. I rewatched it fairly recently and it still fucking stands up today, 10 years later. It is unbelievable. Of course it was going to be in my top 10. I fucking love it. I love this movie. It is utterly savage. I think it might be one of the most violent films I've seen. You know, in recent memory anyway. When she has to cut off her arm with an electric knife. Brutal stuff. You feel that, man. This savage. This film is so good. I will always defend it. And I recommend this 4K while I'm here. It's pretty good. It's a pretty decent transfer. Evil Dead 2013, man. I adore this film. I adored it the moment I left that fucking cinema in 2013 after I saw it on the big screen. And I adore it now. It's my favourite Evil Dead movie in the franchise. That is probably come with a lot of contention from people because I know that Evil Dead 2's got a lot of love. But I'm not really a horror comedy guy. There's a few in this list that I've shown already, but I'd rather go full on horror than horror comedy. And yeah, Evil Dead 2013 definitely went on the full on horror mode, and I appreciate everything about this film. I fucking love it. Number 5 is another perfect horror film of a sci-fi variety. My dad introduced me to this one. And it's got a really big soft spot in my heart because I love it. It's so good. John Carpenter's The Thing. what can I say, guys, with this movie? Kurt Russell is great. The soundtrack is awesome. The practical effects are some of the best ever. And I mean ever, guys. Like, this film still looks great now. You know, it looks great in 1982, most likely. I wasn't alive, but it has stood the test of time. And it looks incredible. And I still love it. Every time I hear that dum dum, I'm just like, I'm in for the thing. I'm ready for the thing, guys. It's fucking awesome. So good. The production design looks great. The cinematography is masterful, and they actually did shoot in freezing temperatures. And it's just, there is so much love about this film. It is remarkable, and it does get under your skin a lot. The blood test scene is one of the greatest sequences in terms of suspense I've ever seen in my life. The simple jump scare of that bit of blood coming to life scared the fucking shit out of me when I was a kid. Probably is my favourite sci-fi horror. That's the thing. This film is my favourite animated film of all time, Princess Mononoke. This film tells a fairly simple tale about humanity versus nature. This movie is a Japanese animation masterpiece, and it's infinitely rewatchable, guys. It's so good. The characters are amazing. The soundtrack is incredible. The animation is some of the best ever, in my opinion, and the story is something I think anyone could get into. It's heartwarming. It's kind of dark in places. It keeps you going forward like it's an adventure, but it keeps you asking questions as well. Like, it's really good. Such a good movie. On the back of this Blu-ray, it does say that it's the Star Wars of animated features. I want to say it is, but it didn't have the impact that Star Wars had, of course. But I think it's an animated film that everyone needs to watch. It is gorgeous. It is wonderfully acted in Japanese and in English. Both language options are very well done. My favourite animated film of all time, Princess Mononoke. Coming in at number 3, Cowabunga, dude. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990. Now, as a kid, I was obsessed with the Ninja Turtles. In the UK, of course, they weren't called Ninja because the word Ninja was banned for some reason. So it was called Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles in the UK. I'll always remember my last year of primary school, we could go around all of our old classes and see our old teachers, and they could write in a little notebook like a goodbye message, good luck in secondary school. And my reception teacher, this is meant to give you an example of how much I was obsessed with the Ninja Turtles. My reception teacher wrote in this little notebook, I've probably got it somewhere. She said, "Good luck in secondary school, Jason. I always remember finding you in the boys' toilets looking down the drains for Hero Turtles." That just sums my obsession up as a kid, as like a 4-year-old, thinking I could find my own Ninja Turtles in the bloody drains in the toilet. It's great. This film is the greatest comic book adaptation ever. It's the most faithful to me. It's brilliant. It takes the original first act of the original comic, and kind of adapts it perfectly, dark tone and everything, but it gives us a bit of the splash of colour that is necessary based on how big the cartoon was in the 80s. It's got so many great quotable lines. Pizza Dude's got 30 seconds. Fucking all the characters are great. Raphael is one of my favourites. He's got the greatest scream ever in this movie. And when they discover that Splinter has been kidnapped, Raphael's cry of sadness is just so heartbreaking and horrible to hear. This film is wonderful. The turtle suits were made by the Jim Henson company, and yeah, it's fucking awesome. Like, they look great as well. The best live action turtles we've had on screen ever. The soundtrack, the actors, the characters. Shredder, holy fuck, Shredder is the greatest thing about this movie. He looks terrifying, commanding voice. Everything about this film is fucking great. This couldn't have been better. We couldn't have asked for a better live action Ninja Turtles movie back in the 90s. This will never be topped for me. 1990s Ninja Turtles is fucking king. Now, I've thought about my number 1, and it had to be a film that I could easily rewatch over and over again and just love to the point of ridiculousness. So it made me decide to do a few things. So my number 2 is Godzilla from 1954. Or, if you want to be Japanese about this, Gojira. This film is a 50s masterpiece in my opinion. Godzilla as a kind of titular monster has become an icon. He has a fucking star in Hollywood, as far as I'm aware. I think he does. Comment down below, I might be wrong. But yeah, this film is bleak, it's dark, it's nowhere near what you would expect from what Godzilla became later on. Because later on the franchise becomes really kind of kid-friendly and goofy. This film tackles subject matter of, like, you know, nuclear power, you know, atomic power, and the misuse of that. And, you know, Godzilla is a kind of like a metaphor for that kind of thing. And this film is dark, it's bleak. You see children crying over their dead parents. There's a scene with a mother who are basically talking to her daughters and accepting death and saying, oh, your father's in heaven, we're going to see him soon. Like, it's fucking bleak. This is not a film that you can happily go and sit and watch and be ha 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 happy. You've got to mentally prepare yourself for this film. It's a dark movie. It has its some sense of levity as well, but it's dark, it's bleak. And I will say it's probably got the greatest cinematic weapon of all time in the Oxygen Destroyer. Basically a weapon that just takes all the oxygen out of water and just kills everything. It's fucking badass. Yeah, Godzilla is my number 2. Used to be my number 1, but I've had to thought about stuff, and my number 1 makes a lot of sense. But yeah, Godzilla 1954, I fucking adore this film. It is a masterpiece of 50s cinema. It created the kaiju subgenre, and Godzilla is coming up to, like, stupid age now. 37 movies and almost 80 years old. It's getting crazy. Godzilla 1954 is a Japanese masterpiece. Ishiro Honda's baby, and I implore everyone, if you've not seen it, to give it a chance, because I fucking adore this film. We are down to my number 1. I thought about my number 1. Used to be Godzilla, but I thought to myself, the film that I should put at my number 1 is the film that I always talk about. I'm a broken record about it. I got a poster on my wall for it, multiple posters, and I can watch this film at any moment. I watched it a couple of days ago. I've seen this film more times than I can even think to count. You guys all know what it is. You know what it is, guys. It is 1986's Critters. I cannot put into words how much I adore this movie. I adore the characters. I adore the little monsters themselves. I adore the soundtrack. I adore the bounty hunters. I adore everything about this film. It is a great horror comedy. It's an underrated science fiction movie. The critters are the coolest little small animal monsters ever. They're better than Gremlins in my opinion. I fucking love this movie. It's just, if I feel like shit, I watch Critters. If I feel happy, I watch Critters. If I feel kind of like, I watch Critters. If you get the gist here, no matter what my mood is, Critters can solve everything. It's my favourite film of all time. I adore it. I could put it on, like, right now and have a fucking blast with it. Have a smile on my face. Everything about this movie is just perfect to me. I love it so much, and I will always love it. As you can see, I've got multiple posters of it on my wall here. I just love it. I can't... It's hard to put into words why you love something. This has just been in my life for such a long time. I've seen it so many times. I can go back to it infinitely amount of times and still have a great time with it. Like I said, I watched it a couple of days ago and I still had a great time with it. Everything about this movie is awesome. I've got my own little prop puppet. We call him Steve. You might have seen him before. I just adore this film. I adore it. Everything about it. It's an 80s time capsule for me. Like, I always just get 80s vibes from this. The Power of the Night song is, in essence, a bad song, but I just love it because it's in Critters. It's just, everything about this movie to me is just I just can't help but smile about it. I love this movie. I love the little krites, furballs of teeth that want to eat your face, but they're adorable. I love them. I love this movie. That's my number 1 of all time. That is Critters. What I really wanted to try for this video was really pick. It was hard because I wanted to pick movies that I can infinitely rewatch. They needed to be go-to movies for me. So there's probably going to be some of the obvious ones that I can probably see in other people's top 10s. I don't really have a lot of obscure picks here, but I wanted to pick, I wanted to put stuff on the list that are go-to movies for me, that I'm always going to pick out and watch. And that's why that's how I could make this top 20 list. That's it, guys. Let me know what you think about my top 20 in the comments down below. And I will see you next time, I suppose. Bye.